Welcome to Be Brilliant with Jing Lang, the podcast dedicated to those seeking to excel in every aspect of their lives. Through conversations with her guests, Jing will tease out personal stories, helpful tips, and proven strategies to help you elevate your life and reach your highest potential. Get ready to dive in and discover what it means to be truly brilliant. And now, here's your host, Jing Lang.
Alice Locatelli is a visionary executive known for driving transformative business strategies and innovation, currently serving as Chief Technology Innovation Officer at the Society of Actuaries. She aligns cutting-edge technologies with strategic goals, enhancing organizational efficiency and user experience. Alice's career has centered around business, technology, and education.
Alice, it's so great to be with you this morning. How are you?
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm doing really well. It's exciting to be on with you today.
And where are you calling from today?
I'm calling in from our offices at Society of Actuaries, so the headquarters here just outside of Chicago.
That's amazing. So until we met a few months ago, I didn't know the Society of Actuaries have a Chief Technology Officer, which is you. Can you give us a sense of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Career-wise, I have really centered my career around three major buckets. So I've focused on business, meaning strategy, transformation, operations, those sorts of things. Around technology, starting out in data, shifting into even crypto, emerging technologies, AI, all of those kinds of things. And the education sphere as well. Society of Actuaries is primarily an education institution. And I've also worked at museums like the Museum of Science and Industry that is education focused, as well as starting my career very early as a high school teacher and working in ed tech at other points. So those are sort of the three buckets that my career is centered around. And most jobs that I've had fall into two of those three buckets at least. So
that is very interesting. I did not know that you were a high school teacher at some point.
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to be a high school English teacher, actually. When I started college, that was my plan, was to become an English teacher. I'm a little bit far from that now, how time transforms us. When I got to college, I started taking English classes and, reading literature. And the classes felt very similar to what I had done in high school. It was kind of an extension of the same thing. And here I was at college, feeling like I should be learning something new. Everything should be different. It was going to be a whole different world. And it felt so similar to everything I'd done before. So my second semester of freshman year, I took 4 different classes and things that I didn't know anything about: anthropology, sociology, another hard science, and computer science. And in my computer science class, I had a professor's assistant who was absolutely phenomenal and completely inspired me to continue down the computer science path. So that kind of shifted my journey into more of this technology domain, and also shifted my brain a lot to be more logical, analytical side of things, where earlier in my life, I was a little bit more writing oriented and creative and, and artistic. And now I play a lot more in the logical, analytical space.
Wow, that is so amazing, given that you clearly have both the left and the right side of the brain. A common misperception is that people have inability to master the other side and vice versa. That hasn't been the case in my experience and for the people I've noticed. What about you?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a lot of how we operate is based on what we do and whether we're trying to learn things. It is true that if you're more creative, you're often drawn to doing creative things and learning more about that and getting deeper into that. And if you're logical, analytical, sort of like how we gravitate towards people who are like us, we gravitate towards subjects that are subjects we're comfortable with. It's sort of a natural process. People get deeper and deeper into specialized things. I've always had a big passion for being much more of a generalist. I love learning things that I know nothing about. I'm very happy to swim in the space of brand new things that are unfamiliar to me. So even later, when I was doing my MBA, there's 2 big schools here in Chicago: University of Chicago, which is considered a little more logical, analytical, and Northwestern, that's considered a little more creative, marketing oriented. And at that point in my career, it would have fit for me to go to Northwestern. I was coming from Stanford, which is a very similar culture to Northwestern culture. I was coming from a master's in education, which is more along the creative side, and it really would have made sense to go there. And I actively chose to go to the University of Chicago because I felt like I could learn a lot from finance folks and logical analytical folks that exist there. And obviously both are in both, but I wanted to learn more about that because in business, you don't just work with people who are just like you and think just like you. So I really wanted to learn more for myself to improve myself and figure out different ways that I could look at questions and situations, and also learn how to work with people whose brains don't operate in the same way that my brain was operating at that point. So, I just think it's really interesting to keep learning and looking for those things that are hard for you and leaning into them and learning about them.
That's incredible because there's so much discomfort and yet you constantly push yourself in that direction.
Yeah. I am often looking for things that are interesting. That said, I can also make, smart business decisions or life decisions. So sometimes you're in the middle of doing other big things like, you're a parent to a couple of kiddos and it's not the right time to dive into something somewhere. So I do think that this is a little bit about balance. If you're always swimming in a new deep end, then that can get overwhelming. So a lot of this is about balance, learning something new, diving into that, having some comfort in some place that you've been. So the way that I've thought about it from a career perspective is with pivots. So I think of career in a lot of ways like a Rubik's Cube, where, it might have three major dimensions. I named my three, business, technology, education. And I try to keep two of those the same and then shift one to learn something new. And this applies for people who are younger or earlier in their career as well, where if you see a career that you want that's different from what you're doing, think about how you can shift into that company. So, for example, if you're in a sales position today and you really want to shift into a development position, find a company that has both salespeople and developers, shift into the organization as a salesperson. And then once you're there and you know the business and you've shown what a great hard worker you are and how you can add value, then work toward shifting into that developer position. Or if you're at a company today that has developers, show your value in what you're already doing and already good at, and then use that as leverage to sort of learn the new thing and eventually shift into that new role. So I really think a lot about what you keep the same and which things are new at any given point.
That's very methodical. Thank you for that advice. I want to go back to one thing you mentioned. You mentioned you love to be a generalist and that you're a generalist in specialist world. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in the same way that you asked the question that, it's a commonly held myth that you have one side of your brain or the other, and that's the way you learn, and that's fixed. We know from education research that is true. We know that Howard Gardner came out with the different methods of learning. So visual, bodily kinesthetic, auditory, and everybody's a mix of those things. And you can learn in a way that's more comfortable to you for some things, and other things make sense to learn in a way that's maybe your third or fourth learning style. In that same way, our world is set up for specialists. If you think about how careers operated, 25 years ago, you started at a company and you stayed at that company and you kept working there for 25, 30 years. That's a rarity today, but in the way that we've structured businesses tends to be around this. You start in a position and then after X number of years or positions or whatever the qualifications are, then you move up to the next level and up to the next level and up to the next level. We often don't think of careers as generalist careers. We think you start in marketing and then you move your way up the chain. I personally like to play across a lot of areas. I've, led operations, product, technology, marketing. I've hit on most of the major area verticals that we traditionally think about in business. And to me, weaving between those adds value. Because if you know how marketing is thinking about a technology problem, when you're solving that technology problem, you're bringing in some of those insights into whatever technology problem you're solving, or vice versa. So I think there's a lot of value in flowing between them. But if you look at any job description on the web today, it's very rare that they say, we're looking for someone who's just sort of generally good at things and likes learning a lot. That's usually not what the job description is. It's based around what vertical does it fall in? What level is it at? It's very much a grid system that way. So we've really structured our world logically based on where we're coming from to be this sort of specialist model. And I like being a generalist. I like thinking like a generalist. And I just have learned the skill of telling my story about my specialist skills in whatever area is relevant for the job I'm applying for a lot of times. The other big skill, being a generalist in a specialist world, is networking, knowing people, because once people understand your value and you have seen it, they are much more apt to bring it into another organization. So a lot of times I'm less looking for what job I want to do and much more focused on who I actually want to work with and who has understood what kind of value I add, even though I'm not this traditional specialist role that people tend to look for.
So when you decide who you want to work with, what are those criteria?
A lot of it is who I have found great working compatibility with in the past. So it's a combination of them seeing my value, me understanding how to work well with them, and us doing really cool projects together. So there's no real formal definition for cool projects. When my first daughter was born, I stopped working for a bit to sort of reassess and think about what I wanted to do. And as I was looking at different consulting project options, I really just focused on what sounds so exciting to me that I would, I'm willing to do that despite having everything else on my plate as a new parent. And if it's something that was exciting enough to me to do, then I would absolutely dive in and do that. So I've tried to carry that forward into my career now and try to really focus on what do I like doing? What am I good at doing? And what do I enjoy doing? What gives me that kind of learning? I love when I have a project where I can do it or lead it or be part of it and also learn new things along the way. So I really think about it a lot that way as I'm changing careers or, changing jobs or roles and as I'm hiring people too. I'm often looking for who do I think is going to be really incredible to work with? Who am I going to learn from? Who's going to learn from me? Who's going to gather information from around? And just really a lot of it, the people connections rather than the actual job or the company or the role. Though I do love society of action.
So what you mentioned your values earlier. What are your values and what characteristics do you look for?
Yeah, that's a great question. My biggest value, as you can probably glean, is lifelong learning. I love to learn and love people around me learning. Trust and integrity are also incredibly important to me as core values. It's really hard to do a job if you can't trust the people around you. So that level of trust absolutely has to be there. And then because of my deep connection with people and with who I'm working with, I also have a strong loyalty value. So I really keep in touch well with people from past roles and careers. I always say, life is long, careers are long. We'll probably work together again sometime. And I've really made that true in my own career. I tend to loop back to people who I've worked with in the past and had really great synergy with. And then, at that new place, more people will join my network and cadre of people who are just really great to work with.
That's so cool. You did mention that you love to work with interesting people on interesting problems. So that sounds exactly how you make those decisions.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I know you mentor young women, and a lot of what you help them with is helping them articulating their story. Why is it important?
It's really important because we live in a storytelling world. Nobody learns things as well from reading a book of facts, even actuaries from reading a book of facts, as they do from hearing a compelling story that captures them. And I used to work in admissions at Chicago Booth. And the biggest advice that I always gave to people was put your story together in a really nice, neat, clean package that the admissions reader who has, however much time they're allocated to look at your package, that it all makes sense to them and there aren't sort of hanging threads of like, well, why do they say that in the essay when all of their experience points to something different? Or, why did they do this experience, but their job is over here? Really, your job in an admissions essay, in a job application, in everyday life sometimes is to tie those threads together for whoever you're speaking to and explain it in sort of a nice, neat little package that people can consume, because it's hard to consume and remember information that doesn't make sense. You don't remember sort of disparate facts that don't seem to tie together nearly as well as you understand a well-constructed story that just all makes sense and flows together.
How would you do that? I imagine it's easier to have a clear story when someone's a specialist, it's a generalist yourself. How do you articulate your own story? And what advice do you give for those who also are generalists?
Part of it is about understanding your audience and who you're speaking to. What story are you trying to tell in that moment? And pulling in the relevant facts to that story. I'll give you an example from when I was applying to the University of Chicago for my MBA program. At that point, I was relatively young in my career. I had an undergrad degree in computer science. I had a master's in education. I was applying for the MBA program, and I had worked at Accenture in insurance consulting for about a decade. So the way that I sort of tied those threads together, I needed a story that would be compelling to the business school, that they would say, if we turned her down and she went somewhere else and she really succeeded in what she's saying she's going to do, we would regret that we didn't have her in our alumni network. That was a really important point, was to have something that would be compelling to the business school, a business idea that would make sense to them, ideally something I was working on, which I did have, and then tying together the education, technology, consulting combination. So I wrote about how when I was a high school teacher, and this is true, when I was a high school teacher, I was trying to build personalized learning software for my students based on their learning styles. So visual, bodily, kinesthetic, auditory, all of those learning styles that we know about. I tried to build software that would tailor what content they got. So if they're learning parabolas, some of them would throw a ball, bodily kinesthetic, and sort of trace the arc of the ball, and other ones would do something more visual, or would, if they were more musical auditory, they would hear the tones in a parabolic shape kind of. So I tried to build that as a high school teacher. And what I learned was, in computer science school, they absolutely teach you how to code, how to write code. But I personally did not really learn how to create full-scale production software in school. I learned how to create sort of a little Java application that could be used, but it wasn't really production seeming. The story that I told with Chicago Booth was, I want to circle back to that and build something now. So when I was building this personalized learning software, it was before we had a term of data science. It was before we had personalized learning software full scale. And I wanted to really circle back around on that part of my career and say, now that I've spent, at that point, it was maybe 6 or 8 years at Accenture. Now that I've spent time at Accenture learning how software is built, I want to circle back to this idea that I had as a teacher and do this as an entrepreneur and really build this technology. And that was kind of how I tied together everything into a story. You could look at that and say, these are really all things, right? You've got education over here, you got some Accenture consulting, you have technology. And what I did was sort of tied it up in a bow in a way that was meaningful to the business school to submit as an application.
And it worked because you got in. Among other criteria, I'm sure you have already also highly succeeded. So tell us now about AI integration. You're a public speaker, or in addition to your role at the SOA, you speak quite a bit on AI integration. Can you give us a sense of your talks?
Yeah, absolutely. I speak about AI. I speak about a handful of topics. Really, to me, AI follows a lot of what we've been talking about all along here. AI is pulling together a lot of things for a lot of people, and AI is helping to tell that story to us more quickly. So in just using ChatGPT as an example, you can upload a set of data and it will tell you what some key points are that you can take out of it. You can upload, a bullet point of your wins in your career so far, and it can put it into a performance review for you. It's really pulling together a lot of these threads for us to be able to tell a story. So the thing that I love to do is really to connect emerging technology with business need to create strategic advantage for organizations. So the way that I think about AI is not, hey, AI is here, let's just bring it in your organization and put it anywhere we can. It's a lot about, what business challenges do you have that we can potentially solve, maybe using AI, maybe using something else. What are your biggest pressing needs? And is AI potential to help you with that? Do you have a manual process that you're using that, AI would be a good replacement for? if it's something that you haven't really tried solving before, it might not actually be worth doing using AI. But there is a lot going on in the AI space. It is an absolutely fascinating world. And a lot of what I love doing is helping people get started, figure it out in their business, figure out how it can connect into everything else that they're doing.
Is there a particular call to action message you generally have at the end of your public speaking engagements?
Yeah, the biggest thing I say, a lot of times who have the most questions for me are people who haven't really played with it themselves. So any of the scarier questions of AI, is it going to replace everyone? Is it going to take my job? Are we headed to Skynet in the Terminator? Is this AI going to
Yes,
take us?
we are.
We might be, but in seriousness, I do not have a lot of those fears because I spend so much time with the tools that we have now. So my biggest advice is if you haven't logged on to ChatGPT, start by logging on. If you have logged on, anytime you would normally do a Google search, try asking ChatGPT instead, just as a micro moment that you can use to learn it. If it doesn't give you the answer you want, if it, seems not right, great, just go over to Google. You've lost, 10 seconds of your life and you're starting to learn something new. What I find is that over the course of time, as people start to ask ChatGPT the questions they normally would have asked Google, they tend to ask ChatGPT a few more questions. So, where they might have asked one thing, then ChatGPT responds and it prompts another question because ChatGPT is so conversational in nature. So it's easy to access. There's a free version that is very good. And so my call to action is if you haven't gotten started, get started with that.
I did a couple of sessions on generative AI at the conferences, and that's what I tell people too, because there are a lot of people who are, like you said, the same concern. And I was like, just try it. There's a free version. Even for the non-free version, it's only $20. So just consider that as tuition.
That is a really terrific personal starting point if you end up getting into the paid version. The paid version gives you some better answers in the general chat, but the really cool thing that it gives you is the ability to create custom GPTs for yourself. And what I love about this is that you can upload whatever files you want to train a GPT to give you the kind of answers you want. So at that level, if you are already comfortable with free GPT, you kind of know it. My advice is to create a custom GPT for yourself, of you, of your career, of whatever you do. I have a GPT for myself and I've uploaded, past resumes, any speaking bios of things that I've done, even performance review or personality assessment type things so that it really knows me. And then when somebody asks me for a bio, I can say, you need a bio for me. Great. I can ask my custom GPT to create a bio based on your podcast and what what you're doing here and create a story that matches what we're talking about today. Or if you're applying for a job, it can create resumes for you or cover letters or any of those kinds of things. So it's a really easy, low bar thing to do for anyone who's a step beyond GPT and wants to get in the paid version, but doesn't really see the value. You'll see the value.
Thank you for that. I in fact have created not one, but 13 customized ChatGPTs. I call it my brain trust. So these are actual historical people. The result, however, is mixed. Maybe you can help me on this, Alice.
Yeah, so I have done that. And I'll say, different, as you get into it more, different models work well for different things. ChatGPT has more controls on it than some of the other models that are out there. So at this point, for things like that, I am using other tools and other models and, could list off those tools. But I think as you get into it, you sort of get to know what are the things that are useful to me and how can I play with different models and create different types of GPTs for different types of things. I think over time we will even out on what are the things that we disallow models to do and allow. I think we're trying, as a country, we're trying to be pretty safe about it. So the US specifically is trying to be pretty safe about it. In Europe, there are no such concerns. If you use Mistral, which is a French-based model, anything's fair game. There seem to be no controls on it at all. So positives and negatives to the different approaches, but it is interesting to see culture played out in the different models for sure.
Is there any suggestion you have for me for what I want to use it for?
Sim theory is my preferred way to try different models out. So there's a tool, it's a paid tool, so I don't usually mention it on podcasts, but simtheory.ai has the ability to really easily flip between models, always bring on every new model pretty immediately after it's released. So I really like that for sort of the cutting edge work in AI and getting different kinds of answers and building different tools. But it is a paid tool, so I usually try not to mention it in speaking engagements.
Thank you for that. I will check it out. Well, tell us more about your role at SOA. So you're the Chief Technology Officer in the largest actuarial professional organization globally. What is the most gratifying things in your role?
The thing that is both the most surprising and the most gratifying is how welcoming the Society of Actuaries is to change and transformation and just how engaged they are in the process. Actuaries are by nature often more risk averse people. They measure risk for a living, so it kind of comes with the territory. And I think there's real propensity at an organization that serves actuaries to be extremely risk averse and to sort of avoid things that, transformation. Arguably, I think Society of Actuaries is potentially the leading association when it comes to AI and AI adoption. We do a lot of speaking and engaging with other associations to help them learn how to work with AI, incorporate it into their business strategy, all of those kinds of things. And so I've just been really excited that there is a huge opportunity here to stay ahead of the curve on a lot of the AI tools as well as other transformation tools as we make large shifts in our organization. Staff, board, people, everybody asks questions, good questions, and they want to make sure it's done correctly. But there is a real appetite for change and transformation. And that is not always the case at organizations our size. So I've been really happy to see how embracing they are of change and transformation at Society of Actuaries.
Is there an internal chat GPT within SOA?
We are working on one. So we certainly use Microsoft Copilot, and that's part of our ecosystem. We did an enormous amount of training of staff. So this is kind of the balance, right, of staying risk averse, but also engaging in these things. We did a lot of training on responsible use, which was our biggest priority. We rolled that out really quickly and really focused on that first. And we've since rolled out more functional training for users to teach them how to use it and how to embrace it. We have office hours with a couple of our staff who are well versed in AI, so people can come and ask them questions that they have and sort of have an opportunity to ask what they might feel like are dumb questions. There are no dumb questions, but it gives them sort of a free time to play there. We encourage use of Microsoft Copilot first because it's within our tenant. It's very safe. Risk-averse users, it can be a really safe place that if they put in our organization's data, it only stays within our tenant. So they're not exposing it to the world. For users who want to be more edgy, we have some tools that are allowed for, different purposes. And we started with policy. So building out what is that policy? What are you allowed to use and when and why? And then we also accepted use cases from our staff to say, here's something I want to use AI for. Should I? Is that okay? Here's a tool that I see that seems cool. Should I do that? And we really worked with our users to try to, and continue to work with our users to figure out what are the best use cases? How do we balance budget with new tools as well? Because it costs money to do these things. And what are the rules around that? We are currently working on building a couple of different AI tools within the organization. And we've got goals set out for them. But as with any AI development, part of our goal is learning. So we're doing this through our innovation fund, and we have goals set out for it. But I also anticipate that we will learn a lot along the way. So I'm not saying too much about what we're building yet until I have a good sense of what actually comes out of this. So, yeah.
That's so exciting. I can't wait as a voting member of the SOA. I can't wait to see what that looks like. Alice, and obviously you have done a number of things already, as you have shared. But one thing that really surprised me is that you used to be a professional sushi chef. Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is part of my belief in just learning new things and diving in. I had never had so much as a job in the restaurant industry. I was never a waitress, which I'm embarrassed to say. I never had that opportunity. And I really like sushi a lot. It's just, personally my favorite food. And I was at a sushi restaurant and I was asking, there weren't many people there that day. So he was kind of chatting to us and I was asking him, how does one become a sushi chef? What is the process for that? And I was kind of expecting an answer along the lines of, you fly to Japan for a month and you spend time in such and such school and this is, or there's some kind of credentialing program and insert location here. And he said that at their restaurant specifically, the head chef really likes to train new sushi chefs and he never hires experienced sushi chefs because he likes to, usually he takes either busboys or waiters or others who are in the restaurant and show propensity for being a sushi chef. And he likes to train them from scratch because then he knows that they have the practices that he believes in and, all things they do exactly the way that he believes it should be done, which is sort of necessary in a structured environment. You don't want to get different sushi at this restaurant today than you got a week ago. You want it to be somewhat similar. So that was really interesting to me. I had just finished my MBA at Accenture and I was working at Accenture at the time. I had finished my MBA at Chicago booth and felt like I had so much extra time on my hands because I was no longer doing this, 40-hour a week MBA on top of my Accenture job. So it felt very freeing. And so I went home and thought about it. I went back the next day and I applied to learn to be a sushi chef there. I was trained under this head chef who was really incredible. I worked at, it was Tank Sushi in Lincoln Square. So I worked there for a while. And then the owner opened up a Mariano's sushi counter downtown. It's a little bit less glamorous on the sushi chef scale to work in a Mariano's than to work at a restaurant. And so he was looking for people who were not in it for the glamour, I guess, which I didn't really think this was going to be my forever career path. So I was happy to work at Mariano's. It was a little closer to my house. So I worked there for a while. And then I also opened my own business doing, birthday parties and corporate celebrations and, all have the boss make sushi and everyone laughs at them or have, a birthday party experience where everyone can learn how to do it. So so I did that for a long time and really enjoyed that. And it really fit into this left-right brain creativity as well. So for me, I've always been drawn to things I'm not by nature an amazing, painter or sculptor or things that are sort of coming from nothing, making them into something that isn't necessarily my forte. I have always really liked more sort of structured creativity is how I think about it. So an example is when I was in college, I liked doing quilting a lot because you have a pattern and you're following it. And it is arguably a creative process, but it's more of a structured creativity. I think sushi is similar to that, where the plates can look absolutely beautiful and incredible, but there's a level of structure to it. You have to have your slices, fundamentals first. You have to have your slices super even. Otherwise, you can't be very creative with them. There's limited patterns you can do if one of them's really thin and the next one's really thick. But then once you have these sort of Lego building blocks, there are different ways that you can be creative to make the plate beautiful. And we eat with our eyes first, so that's important. So it was a lot of fun. It was a great learning experience for me.
What's your favorite thing to make?
And I make a lot of salmon since I was at the sushi restaurant. I always eat a salmon sashimi or nigiri and a spicy tuna anywhere I go. That's sort of my baseline measurement for sushi restaurants. It gives you a good understanding of their quality of fish as well as their, role, what their recipe is for spicy tuna. It does vary a little bit, different places you go. You can just get a sense of what they're going for as a sushi restaurant. And the rice, you can kind of tell, is it overcooked, undercooked, perfect, any of those kinds of things. So that's what I gravitate to from an eating perspective. And I also prefer salmon in general for making it because I'm usually going to eat whatever I'm making.
That's so cute. I like that. And next time if I go to a sushi restaurant, I'm going to have to order that too.
Just find whatever your baseline is, I think, just like in, measuring technology projects, we have to have a baseline to improve on it. So that's kind of how I think.
I love it. So now that I know my baseline for Thai food is pad Thai.
Yeah, exactly.
Alice, thank you so much for your time today. Is there anything you want to share with the audience that I haven't asked?
Well, I really appreciate you bringing me onto this, and I appreciate you having this podcast. I love your inspiring story of, kind of how you came to bring this podcast to life. I love connecting it into the actuarial experience, but also really bringing in your and my life experience into it and helping people to be brilliant. So just really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alice. Have a great day.
You too.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Be Brilliant with Jing Lang. We hope you found valuable insights and motivation to fuel your journey. Be sure to like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. And share this with 3 people in your life endeavoring to achieve personal greatness. Remember, brilliance is within you, and every step you take brings you closer to your best self. Keep striving, keep shining, and until next time, stay brilliant.